this is going to be, I think this will be a shorter webinar. We're going to talk about the markets that we're focusing on for 2019, as well as some other markets that we like. We're going to talk a little bit about why we like markets. Just realized my shirt is looking pretty snazzy on the video here. Maybe next time I won't wear something with a pattern. The basic idea here is to talk about what we like, but also talk about how we arrived at this conclusion, so that if you want to go out and pick your own markets, do your own market research, we can give you some pointers in the right direction to do that. And so basically there's just a few things that we look for when we're choosing a market. We're asking these questions. Is there job growth? Is there population growth? Are those going to continue, right? So it's impossible to truly predict the future, but you can see some broad trends that are emerging in different cities, different metropolitan statistical areas. And so you can get a sense of, is it going to continue growing over the next 5 years, or is it going to flatten out and start shrinking? And is it business and landlord friendly, which is somewhat subjective. I mean, if you go on Google and look and search on, business friendly states or landlord friendly states, you'll get different results depending on who compiled the list. But there's definitely some that almost never make the list. So, California doesn't usually make the list of landlord-friendly states, for example. And this is the most important for us and for you if you want to do out-of-state investing, is do you have trusted local partners? Do you have people there who can go look at the properties, that you trust their judgment? When you put something under contract and start doing your due diligence, obviously you want to go inspect it yourself, but you want someone who can go there and just give you a sense of, is this the right neighborhood for us? Is this consistent with what they know about the local market? For example, is this sub-market, is this neighborhood one that's going to be growing? Because it's easy enough to say that, say, Atlanta is going to be growing by 3%, but it depends on what part of Atlanta you're in. And that's where having a trusted local partner really makes a difference. And then lastly, can you get there quickly? I learned this the hard way with our first deal in Bridgeport, Connecticut. It is not pleasant to travel to Bridgeport. You can either fly into New York and pick your poison there, LaGuardia or Kennedy, and drive for 2 hours, or you can fly into Hartford, which is, I prefer, it's a smaller airport, but there's only like one flight a day. So, you don't really have a lot of options going there. So we look for places that we can get to within 3 hours or so by air, if possible. And so you're going to see on our list of cities we like, there's going to be some that are just a little too far away from us because they're more on the East Coast, we being based in Denver. But obviously for some of you that might make more sense, but it can get to be a grind to having to do a 6 or 7 hour trip just to go visit a property. So let's talk about some of the tools and reports you can use in making these lists. So one that I like a lot, and the new one should be coming out soon. This is the Milken Institute. Does anyone remember Michael Milken? He was the junk bond king in the 80s. He did a little prison time and I guess a little soul searching. And he started a nonprofit called the Milken Institute, which does a lot of different things, but one of them is the Performing Cities list. And I see we're getting some questions here. I'm just going to double check and make sure everyone can see my screen, I hope. This one is usually they post this at the very first part of the year. So I would expect the 2018 list to be out probably in the first week of January. And this is a lot of fun to look at because it just gives you just reams of statistics about different cities and it ranks them. The ranking, I think, is a little overdone. They rank the 200 best cities and they move them up or down. And I think it's a little silly to try to, with that level of precision, say that something went up by 50 spots this year compared to last year and vice versa. But it is a good way to get an overview of what are some of the big cities. And, a lot of them are lesser known cities. For example, Provo, Utah is one of their top performing cities. And so it may open up your thinking about a city you hadn't considered before beyond the typical very large cities and state capitals and so on. Some other tools you can use are REIS, R-E-I-S, Real Capital Analytics. CoStar Group, I'm going to show you some examples of the CoStar Group report here in a moment. And Apartments.com, which happens to be powered by CoStar. So they have a really nice symbiotic relationship where the data that apartments get, they have a pretty good sampling of what rents are doing in a given area, and then they work with CoStar to build reports for each metropolitan statistical area. So let's just get right to it. And let's talk about our top 3 markets that we're going to be focusing on in this year. So, and this isn't in order, by the way. This is just how I happen to write them. So one is the greater Dallas area. So Dallas, Fort Worth, Arlington, that big MSA down there. Another is the Denver Front Range, going as far north as Fort Collins and as far south as Colorado Springs, including places like Greeley, and then Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. And I'll talk more in depth about each one of these. So before I do, let me just show you, because I promised I would. I want to show you what one of these reports look like. So this is a CoStar report, and this is the Dallas-Fort Worth market. And they do a lot of really neat things. They break down the markets into sub-markets for you so that you can really drill in. And they just give you lots of really great historical data on prices and what their forecasts are. And they get even into different types of properties. What's the rent on a Class A versus a Class B and C, or in their case, they call them 4 and 5 stars versus 3 stars and 1 and 2. And so you can really get a really granular view of a market. And I will say these are not inexpensive. They're a bit pricey. We have a partner we work with who provides us with the reports. I will send out links to this one and 2 of our other reports when we do the follow-up email after the webinar. But this is a really excellent report that you can use when you've honed in on a few that you really like, and if you can get your hands on some CoStar reports, those are really helpful. So let me just go through some of the facts about Dallas. So Dallas is the #1 ranked area for in-migration. Here in Denver, we're used to hearing about how the population is growing, which it is. It's growing like crazy. But Denver is still only, I believe, number 13 on the list, whereas Dallas is #1. That's been continuing for a long time. Over 500,000 people have moved in recent years, and it doesn't really show any sign of slowing down. So we really like to see that in the market. Housing affordability there is favorable in the sense that an average mortgage is getting up in the $2,000 range if you want to buy a home there, but you can rent for $1,100. And so this is I won't get the term right, but I believe they call it the rent-buy ratio, which is basically when you look at a market, does it make more sense to rent or does it make more sense to buy? And so if the rent is below what the mortgage would be, then it typically makes more sense to rent. And that's the case with Dallas. And so it's become it's a very desirable place for apartment builders and syndicators like ourselves. So that said, they are increasing. They've averaged about 3.1% year over year in recent years. And the unemployment rate is great in Dallas. It's 3.5%. That's below the national average, where it's been for quite a while. Really, Dallas has consistently outperformed the rest of the country when it comes to unemployment. And the average vacancy, this is from Marcus and Milchat, they say about 4.9%, which is fantastic. If your vacancy is at 95, if you're 95% occupied, you're very happy with how your property is performing. And so again, that just shows how strong the demand is in Dallas. A few other facts. So some major employers, obviously the airport is big there, American Southwest. They've got some tech companies. They got a lot of energy companies. Facebook has grown quite a bit in Dallas. So it's become a very diverse economy there. My sister, as it happens, it's very big in financial services as well. My sister works for Citigroup. They have a major tech office there that she works for, and she's worked in Dallas twice before, and both times it was financial services companies. So those are really growing sectors as well. So the rent growth there. This, I believe, comes from the CoStar report. The rent growth is starting to level off a little bit in the Class A buildings, but B and C are still really strong. For our purposes, all we really care about are the B and Cs. The A's, we don't buy those. What is a good indicator for us is how much new construction is going on, because that affects the market. But now that we're seeing a rent slowdown, we would expect the new builds to slow down as well, which makes the B and C even more desirable over the long term. So the next market we want to talk about is Denver and just the Front Range of Denver. So one of the reasons we like it, of course, is it's in our backyard. We have not made a focused effort to buy in Denver in the last really year and a half we've been doing this. And it was partly because we were a little spooked because all of us had done single family here, and single family is just insane in Denver. And so we weren't as willing to sort of commit to the market here. But after talking to some brokers and looking at some properties, we feel like that Denver, you know, if you really dig, you can find opportunities here. And so we like the demographics of Denver. We like just the general direction of the city. So the net migration here, it's ranked number 13. People who live here in Denver know it's been growing like crazy. But just up and down the road, Colorado Springs is number 43. Greeley is number 49. Fort Collins that says number 5, but it's actually number 50. I left off the 0 there. So those sort of adjacent markets are attractive as well, and we like the overall growth that we're seeing in Colorado. And so of course, it's known as the capital of educated millennials. Actually, I don't know if it's actually known as that, but I'm willing to take that. Plenty of jobs, quality of life is great. The economy is really diversified here in the last several years, as those of you who live here know. And so there's just a lot to like about Denver as a market. It's also, I don't have the numbers at my fingertips, but there's been a little bit of a mismatch in the new development here. There's been a ton of Class A being built here, and it's led to a squeeze where there's a lot of stuff. If you can afford to spend $2,500, $3,000 a month, there's a lot of those kinds of units available to you as a rentor, but not as many that are being built in the lower rent range. The median rent in Denver, I want to say, is about $1,700, and so it's there's a limited supply of those sort of more affordable apartment buildings. So the median price point's $450,000. So again, that makes Denver more desirable to rent than to own. That's been a trend here for the last several years. And then the vacancy across the metro is about 6.7%. So a little higher than we see in Dallas, but still a very solid vacancy rate. And that includes some of these Class A's that I mentioned that have been a little overbuilt. Rent growth of 3.5% year over year, which is actually down a little bit. It was over 4% for the last few years. So, but it's still a very solid rent growth. Some of the major employers, lots of tech companies here. The cable industry is big here. Lots of healthcare, and lots of oil and gas. We don't really have any mention here, but there's plenty of oil and gas companies that are based here as well. So a very diverse economy that's been really crushing it over the last several years here in Denver. We love it because of the jobs, the net migration, the diverse economy. Obviously, we're close to it. We like that we can go down to Colorado Springs in an hour and a half, or up to Fort Collins in an hour or so. And so we're going to be spending more time focusing on this market than we have in the past, which is to say not very much at all. Okay, so the last city we're going to talk about is Oklahoma City. Oklahoma City, part of the reason we like it is we have boots on the ground there. We have a few different people who are active people in the market there, so they can look at properties for us. It has a very solid net migration. It's number 30. It's been growing. 1.4 million, is growing 5% between now and 2022. Affordability. It's a much more affordable market than some of these other markets. So we like that we can go in and buy a property for 30, 40, 50,000 a unit instead of 80, 90, 100,000 per door. The economy's been diversifying. So Oklahoma, of course, is known very much for its energy and oil and gas. But we're seeing some more types of sectors coming in here. I'll show some of the employers in a moment. So one thing to be aware of is the MAPS program there, which is a state allocation of about $750 million that has been invested starting in 2013. And this is actually the third iteration of MAPS. And that will finish in 2021. That includes things like a new convention center, upgrading the public parks, light rail system, all of that. And they're so happy with it, they're going to do it all over again starting in 2022. The MAPS 4 program will come online. So the city is definitely investing in the infrastructure. It's doing things to make it attractive. And we like that about it. And it's close, and we have people on the ground there, which I mentioned right here. So it's going to, there's still, I mentioned MAPS 4. They're still figuring out what exactly that will be, but there's a lot of talk about senior health. I can't even see my screen here. Wellness, that kind of thing, trails, sidewalks, lots of things just to boost the quality of life in the city there. And then some of the employers, my screen isn't actually showing it to me. Let me see if I can see this. So Amazon and FedEx have recently opened up major distribution centers there. Bone First, Chesapeake Energy, which is misspelled. Sorry about that. So some energy sector companies there, but also some of the new economy companies are moving in there as well. Let's talk about just a little bit other markets we like. So I'm not going to really go into any details in these. I just want to throw them out there because if you are looking at markets and you have an edge, maybe you have people on the ground there, trusted partners in these markets, we would like to know about it. We'd like to see deals coming from those markets. So Tulsa, also in Oklahoma, is one we like a lot. And we do have, one of our advisors actually does a lot of single family there, not as much multifamily, but Tulsa is a growing market as well, and seems to be having a lot of good things going its way. Atlanta seems to be perpetually a good market. Now, Atlanta is big. It's really spread out, and there's a lot of different areas of the city. And so that's part of the reason we want a local partner there, is to know what areas of the Atlanta metro to focus on. I actually grew up near Atlanta, and so I knew a little bit about the market, but I haven't lived there in really 30 years at this point. So we would want a local partner before we would do anything there. Nashville also is a very solid market. It's been a very solid market for years. Louisville, I've been hearing more and more really good things about Louisville, Kentucky recently. So let me just check my chat room here. I'm seeing lots of hands going up. So so someone mentioned Louisville here. So yeah, I mean, Louisville, we've been hearing lots of good things about. I used to drive through Louisville a lot on the way between Atlanta and Chicago when I was in college. And I always thought it was a really cool town and just a beautiful countryside. So we've been hearing good things about Louisville. Orlando's another one we like. That one, again, we don't have boots on the ground there, but we were just looking at a deal there recently, and we really liked what we found about the market. So if you or someone you know that you trust is doing stuff in Orlando, we'd love to know about it. And then Houston. Houston's been rebuilding since the hurricane there last year. And similar kind of thing, we don't have boots on the ground, but we actually made an offer on a portfolio there last year, or this past year, but we weren't able to get it under contract. So Houston is an area that we like as well. So let's talk a little bit about, and we're getting into the wrap-up stage here, so we'll be able to answer your questions. Just a reminder, we've got this workshop coming up, the Money Mastery Workshop. If you go to realbluespruce.com/MM, we're going to go into all the details of how to raise money. And we're not going to stop at a lot of times these workshops, they tend to focus on the legal parts of it, and which is fine. Obviously, you want to make sure you do this legally, but this workshop that's actually a pretty small part of it. We're going to talk a lot more about the psychology of money, how to do persuasion, how to put together a deal packet that really gets investors excited. So we would love to have you join us at this workshop. And it's 25% off right now until Christmas Day. So if you want to register, now is the time to do it. And then also coming up next year, many of you have probably heard of Blue Spruce Boardroom, which is our mastermind group. Again, that's 25% off through Christmas. And Adam, why don't you talk a little bit about this mastermind, kind of how it came about and what you want to.
Yeah. Well, it came about because I'm personally a member of a couple other masterminds with some other high level people, and I love masterminds, but I hesitate to even use the word but.
Yeah.
I love masterminds, and some of them are very costly. Some of them are 30 grand, 100 grand per year, 25,000 per year. And so what we really wanted to do was something a little bit different, just something where we added a ton of value to those who wanted to go into multifamily and who wanted to excel in multifamily and do better. And really, it's kind of like a group of people that help each other go to the next level. It's a group of people that assist and help raise money, or we're there to call you out on your BS, which is very important for
It
most
is.
people that are getting into business. We all have our stories, and this is just a great place for us to kind of say, hey, you can't be telling yourself that, or hey, this is really what you need to do, or you say that you love your family, but you're doing nothing with them. This is just a great place where it's kind of like a family. So we meet every week. Some of these other masterminds that might be 30,000 or whatever, they only meet a couple times per year. So this one is always held in Denver. So we're really there for a lot of people that are in Denver, and we meet every single month. It's always the second Wednesday of the month. So there's 12 mastermind meetings, and then you see the 3 giant wine and dine in the middle. You can kind of see that. What that is we're hosting these larger networking events. They're quite a bit bigger, and everybody who's a part of the mastermind gets 3 free tickets. So there's probably going to be maybe 100 people at these networking events, and every single person is multifamily focused, and there's going to be people flying in. So anyway, without sounding like a giant sales pitch, it's just a great group of people that's there to support you if what you want to do is multifamily syndication.
Yeah, and I've done various masterminds over the year, and I'm planning to join another mastermind next year. And I've gotten a ton out of those. So I'm looking for, and I know that we'll get a ton out of this, right? Not just the revenue we earn from it, but um, we'll get to meet a lot of people who are doing a lot of really cool things that we might be able to partner up with. So selfishly, it's going to be an excellent use of our time. Someone asked about the, I did kind of go quickly over the money raising event. So this is actually an in-person event. I think it was Chris asked that question. So we're going to do this at the Crown Plaza. I think it's the Stapleton one. I know it's towards the airport. So if you're coming in from out of town, it's reasonably close to the airport. And it's 2 full days. And we're going to, like I said, talk about persuasion, talk about psychology, talk about marketing, talk about how to build your brand. Everything from as little as how to collect business cards at networking events, how to make sure that you follow up on potential investors and keep them interested and in the loop so that when you do bring a deal. So yes, that is going to be an in-person event on the 12th and the 13th. I believe, I wanted to mention the webinar feedback. So after this webinar is done, when we end the webinar, you're going to see on your screen a link that redirects to this little survey. It's very short. We just ask you your name and just give us some feedback about how are we doing, and also just tell us what you want to know. I mean, we get a lot out of hearing from you, telling us the types of topics you want us to cover, some things that maybe we might be ignoring, or we have a blind spot about. We want to know about that. So this is just a quick 5-minute survey that you can fill out. And so we'd really appreciate it if you do that at the end of this webinar. And happy holidays from Blue Spruce. We talked a little bit in the first webinar about being thankful and grateful. And I hope you all are enjoying the holiday season. I've enjoyed this one more than I have in a long time. I'm not a super festive kind of person, but this year, I don't know, something changed. I actually bought gifts for everyone in the office, and we got a little Christmas tree here and all that stuff going. And I'm going to be actually in Oklahoma City for Christmas. So that'll also be a chance to do a little bit more scouting while I'm out there. And let's go ahead and open it up to any questions that folks may have. You can just post them in the chat here. Adam, maybe you noticed
Yeah, the first
submarket?
question, and I'll direct all these to you, DJ. The
Mm.
first question that came up came from Siva, and he wanted to know, are we just in Oklahoma City? Are we in the suburbs of Oklahoma City? So just kind of redirect that. He says, OKC proper, question mark.
Yeah. So for all of these, we're in the metro area, right? So it could be OKC proper, or it could be outside of it. In Oklahoma City in particular, I'm going to be spending a lot more time there next week and getting to know it better. But I know that like the northwest part, so there's downtown, which is where a lot of the cool stuff is, right? They've got a little river walk there, and that's where all the cool restaurants and stuff like that. That's where all the Class A's are. And then if you go more northwest, there's an area called Nichols Hills, which is I'm trying to think of a good example. That's kind of like the Cherry Creek of Oklahoma City. Cherry Creek here in Denver is a lot more upscale. That's where sort of the high fashion shopping is, and nicer houses are. And then if you go a little further northwest, is where my best friend lives. Is I'm not sure the name of the neighborhood, but it's near Oklahoma City University. That's a very stable market right around there. And so we're going to be looking all around Oklahoma City, but those particular areas are what I know the most about right now. And I'll be looking to learn a lot more. We've got a local partner, Corey Boatwright, who's going to be working with us in Oklahoma City. So we'll have a better sense of exactly what the submarkets are as we get into 2019.
And then Eric Olson wanted to remind us that we have boots on the ground in Atlanta, Georgia as well.
Oh, terrific. Eric, yes. If you want to bring us deals, that's great. I mean, I mentioned I used to live there. When you hear about Atlanta, a lot of the development, and you can see it, it's been just nuts. I mean, for a long time, Cobb County was just an engine. I mean, starting in the 80s. And then Gwinnett County also as well. And the north side of Atlanta, it's amazing, all the development. Where I grew up is actually on the south, the far south, about 30 minutes south of the airport. And you don't hear as much about that area, but the little town I'm from is called Noonan, and that's where a TV show called Walking Dead is shot. And there's a big movie studio there. I can't believe in my little hometown there's actually a movie studio. And there's a lot of healthcare stuff going on there. So, and the airport just continues to expand. I know that they're about to pour several $100 million into various developments around the airport, including the place where I used to play soccer. So, would love to have someone bringing us deals in Atlanta that can really find the exact sub-market to invest in.
And it looks like we got some more questions coming in. I have 3 queued up right now for you. These 3 come from Kathy. So the first one is if we've been looking at Lexington, Kentucky at all.
No. Would love to hear more about it. But I can't say that we've seriously looked at Lexington, partly because it's just hard to get to for us. It's harder to get to.
And then the next one, just wanted to kind of be more specific on DFW. Are we just looking in Dallas? Or are we looking, northwest of Dallas? Kind of get
greater Dallas. I mean, anywhere within about an hour of downtown, honestly. That's such a sprawling city, and there's lots of little submarkets there. So we're going to look, all over that area.
The next one that came from Kathy Leiby is, do you want to talk at all about the mastermind that you said you'd be joining next year?
Oh, well, I'm looking at a couple of them. I'll pick one. One of them is geared toward building a fund. So rather than raising money on a deal-by-deal basis, it's more about how to build a fund, whether it's a REIT or a Reg A or a Reg D offering. So I'm not sure that we're quite ready to do something like that. So that's one I'm looking at. And there's another one I'm looking at that's a little bit more focused on marketing. So I will definitely join one. I won't join both because I just won't have the time. But those are the 2 that I'm looking at.
And then for me, Kathy, we're hosting the Blue Spruce Boardroom, which we talked about. Then I have my own mastermind. We meet weekly. And then I'm a member of Rod Cleef's mastermind. And then I have this smaller mastermind. There's only about a dozen of us, but it's pretty much the top real estate professionals in Denver. So there's, I mean, like, I don't know who you know that's in this because a lot of them kind of play in the background, but Charles Roberts is the biggest face that you might know who's in that mastermind. But additionally, I am looking at 3 masterminds that they have been inviting me, and I just don't know what amount of time I have to put to these. But one of them is all specifically for people who run masterminds. So that one's 22,000, and I'm definitely considering joining that one. And then there's another one that's 25,000. It's Collective Genius. They've been inviting me for 2 years straight. And then the third one is Michael Blanc has been asking me for the last probably 4 or 5 months to be in his mastermind. And, you know, that's another hefty charge. And so I'm trying to decide if I have time to join one of those other masterminds, but mastermind groups are by far my favorite way of learning and growing and connecting with others and letting them call me out on my BS. You know, that's it's a really inviting opportunity to be a part of. So I might join one of those 3. And then let's see what other questions we have coming in. I'm going to work backwards. Jason is the man. CG. Yes. Jason Medley, he runs Collective Genius, and he is phenomenal. He just booked to come on my podcast. So don't tell him yet, but I'm going to pick his brain. And if you listen to my podcast, you're going to learn the ins and outs of the strategies he has been doing to run CG so successfully for the past few years. Good buddy of mine. Oh, crap. So now you're going to tell him that we're going to let him make them spill the beans. Next thing, Dallas, for instance, is insanely expensive. Should that deter smaller syndicators from pursuing deals, since larger players are maybe more dialed in to those expensive markets? Chris, super good question. And yeah, I would say that it would deter you a little bit. It's very hard to compete with the big guys. So really, this is something else that always comes up on the podcast. I always ask you to ask yourself, how can I? So with all the information out there, knowing how incredibly saturated Dallas is, because we see it going up in value for a long time. We see rents going up for a long time. There's a lot of room for that. They already have a low cost of living. So there's a lot of reason to want to be there. So you're asking, should we just focus on another market? And yeah, if you want to just focus on another market, but if you want to focus on that specific market, you're going to have to try to find a way. And I'm laughing because mum's the word. Thanks, Jay. You're going to have to find a way to say, how can I? What can I do to get to the sellers before they go to the brokers? Or what do I need to do? Maybe fly out and talk to the brokers 10 times so that they see me as a big person? Or how can I? What do I need to do? Perhaps I need to align myself with somebody else that's already in that market to get my first deal or 2 done in that market so that I can stay in Dallas. So yes, I see exactly what you're saying. But if you want to be in Dallas, then you just have to ask yourself the question, how can I be in Dallas? And one of those things that I just suggested might be a good solution. Lexington's interesting. So growth states considered focus. I'm in 1 C-class property. All right, let's see. Looking for the questions, guys. If you have any questions, we're wrapping it up now. Go ahead and throw them down. We're happy to answer. What size deals are you looking for? Super good question, Victoria, because, you know, when we started a little less than 2 years ago, when we began our journey into syndicating deals, we bought a 16-plex, and then we said, we're only going to look at 20 or larger. And quickly we decided we're going to do 50 and larger. And then we decided 100, then we went to 150. And right now, deals are fairly tough to find. So we've opened ourselves up recently, not to be at just the 150, but if something is 50 units or more, we would be willing to look at it. So we can go just about as big as we want to go. There's not really a limit because we know through my podcast, we really know practically everybody. I'm very good friends with almost every syndicator that you know of in the nation. They're good friends of ours now. And so if we needed to raise more equity or whatever, we should be able to touch pretty much any size deal by partnering. And then let's see, Eric says movie industry. Okay. And then Marietta, do you see any more questions, DJ?
I'm not, I'm looking through a lot of good comments. So I really appreciate people giving us their feedback on this. Oh, one person asked about Colorado Spring topping Trulia's list. I'd have to look at Trulia to understand what they mean by, housing market to watch. But I mean, it's definitely, there's been a follow-on effect from really the whole Front Range has been just really good for the last 10 years. And Colorado Springs, I flipped a house down there about a year and a half ago. And I was sort of stunned at, at how much money I made on it with so little effort. So yeah, Colorado Springs in general we've been hearing lots of good things, and we haven't drilled down into the submarkets there yet. But relative to Denver, certainly relative to Boulder, it's a more affordable market, but it's growing like the rest of Colorado is. So, we like it just because there's a lot of really good macro trends going on there. Oh, someone just mentioned, yeah, Victoria, she just moved there. Phenomenal market, right? Okay, any other questions from anyone? Going once? Going twice?
New builds.
New builds. Actually, I've been talking with Jerry. Oh shoot, you know what I'm talking about, Adam? Jerry McMinney.
Oh, Minnie.
Yeah, Jerry Minnie. He's looking at some new builds down there. I'm not sure that he's going to be able to do those. I'm not sure what his timeline is. He's been looking at these not manufactured homes, these pod type structures, and I'm surely not using the right word for them, but they're manufactured and can be done on site, for I don't know, half the time, half the cost of custom build. And so no, I don't think it's ADUs. I mean, you can build an entire like a decent sized apartment complex, townhouse style with this. But I don't know much about it. I know he's looking at the company that makes them is based in Colorado Springs. And so there's an advantage in terms of being able to get them, manufactured almost right there on the spot and set up quickly. So that's, I know that's what he's looking at. I'm not sure if he's going to get to that in 2019 or not, though. But Jerry's a very experienced flipper, rehabber, builder. So, I mean, he's done lots and lots of builds over the years. So, if he's doing it, then it's worth paying close attention to.
One thing that we may not have really touched on all too much, so I will share it. I'll ask my own question.
Mm-hmm.
And all that is when you're looking at a new market, so just kind of wrap this up, when you're really focusing on trying to find that new market, you want to really talk to the building department, the Chamber of Commerce, Economic Development. You want to know the economic development person very, very well. You want to be open and conversing with them. Oh, and Bill has 2 questions that we missed. Okay. So just remember economic development, Chamber of Commerce, building department, and you can actually call them on the phone in most cases and chat with them for 20, 30 minutes, or even fly out there and chat with them. Mm-hmm. And you can get a lot of information on what's coming that a lot of the city doesn't yet know.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I made a note to myself to mention that. That is actually the best way. So you can use these reports to get a sense of different markets and numbers, but there's no substitute for talking with someone on the local economic development board or the City Chamber of Commerce. It varies by municipality. They all kind of have their own way of doing it, but they can really give you a lot of insight about what are some of the big macro things that are coming? Are they building a new convention center, or are they, is groundbreaking next year on some new corporate headquarters, that kind of thing. They're really good for that kind of stuff.
And then, so Bill Dybel is mentioning the Denver rental market, the rent to buy ratio versus DFW. And Bill, you're absolutely correct. The rental, it is still technically more affordable these days to rent than buy in Denver. However, it's a drastic difference in Dallas Fort Worth with the 2,000 versus 900. And then why consider Denver? Great question. Why consider Denver? I'll leave that for Mr. DJ.
Well, partly because we're here, right? We know a lot of people in the markets here. So we can get, if we just make even a little bit of effort, which we didn't really do much of last year, we just sort of wrote off Denver. If we even make a little bit of effort to start finding deals off market, I think we can have some success. I mentioned the economic picture. I mean, one sort of, I think it was Charles Roberts. Was it Charles? No, it was Lon. He presented at one of our meetups. The demographics in Denver are kind of wonky. Normally, in sort of a perfect demographic situation, at least perfect from a buyer's perspective, and I'm talking about single family, if you want to buy a home, is you want the sectors pretty much evenly divided up between, 18 to 30, 30 to like 45, 45 to 60, 60 and up, in terms of age, because, the people who are 18 to 30, they'll live in townhomes and apartments, while they're getting established, getting their career going, meeting a partner, getting married. And then when they have kids, they want to move up, they need a bigger house, and maybe they'll stop renting and start buying. And so in order to get that house, they got to buy it from someone else who is, leaving, who is ready to move out, right? So maybe it's someone who has a 2-bedroom, but their family's gotten bigger, so they want to move into a 4-bedroom. And so that person wants to move up to someone who's maybe in their 50s and 60s who's starting to downsize now, right? So that's kind of how the market works, is people kind of move up for their first, let's say, 30 years, and then they start to downsize after their kids go off to college and so on. Denver's really skewed because they got a lot of young people here and not as many middle-aged people, frankly. So that's part of why single family housing is gotten so expensive. And that's why renting is a much more viable option for a lot of people. A lot of people are renting for longer. They, occasionally you'll see a gloom and doom headline about how millennials think they'll never be able to own a house. I don't know if that's true or not. But that's really the dynamic that's happening here in Denver. And so that makes apartments, from our perspective, a more attractive investment, because there are people who just simply can't afford $450,000 for a house.
There's a lot of data showing a lot of these big areas. And for instance, like Seattle is a really good example because it's really on the other side. But as far as just what's overbuilt and who's moving in, so we continue to have more people moving in, more tech jobs, and a lot of people want to stay here. What the data is showing is that we're not overbuilt right now. There's a lot of other markets that are very, very scary. If the economy turns, then places like Seattle might really suffer in the apartment buildings. But as far as Denver, it's much, much less likely to suffer because rents are a little bit better and we're not overbuilt as far as the data shows.
And there is so I just bought a fourplex and moved into it just within the last 6 months. And the rents the people were paying, I did some improvements, so I wasn't just an evil landlord, but the rents had not raised in 7 years in this place. And so I was able to raise the rents by 70% and no one bat an eye, because it was still a bargain compared to what they would get otherwise. So, being able to do that for me made me a lot more confident about other opportunities here in the market, because what we're looking to buy, we're not looking to buy the Class A's, right? Those are optimized to squeeze the most money they can out of renters. We're looking for the properties that, it's a mom and pop, and, they're getting plenty of income from it. So why rock the boat? They don't raise rents. They don't do any improvements. So those are the ones that we're looking for here in the Front Range.
Excellent.
Okie doke. Well, we are going to sign off here. I want to thank you all again for coming out. Watch your email the next day for an email with links to all of this and recordings. And I want to wish everyone just a really happy holiday. I'm looking forward to visiting Oklahoma City, hanging out with my friend. I hope all of you have some fun plans with family and friends. And we will be shut down basically for most of next week. And then after the New Year's, we will be back at it, and we're psyched about 2019. I hope you are too.
Good night, guys.
Good night.